TEFL Commute, Season 5, Episode 2, in which we discuss games.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TEFL Commute. My name is Lindsay Clanfield, and we're doing something a bit different today. Not the first time, but we're doing a roundtable discussion with various TEFL Commute hosts. So before going around the table and asking everyone to introduce themselves, I'll just tell our listeners a little bit about what this is going to be. For a long time, we've wanted to do an episode on games in the classroom. But we found we had so much to say about this area that we're going to do a two-part episode. So this part of the episode is going to be games that are played in the classroom, but that are not digitally related. So if you like, this is the analog games episode. You'll see when we get started on a conversation what kind of games we'll be talking about. And then in the future, we'd like to do another episode, which is about games, but more digital games and how they might impact or might be used in language classrooms. Okay, let's just quickly go around the table. Everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So I'm Lindsay Clanfield. Who else have we got here?
I'm Sean Wilden.
Hi.
Nobody else is here?
Hi, I'm Kerry.
And hello, I'm producer James, back again.
Have you've officially changed your name now?
Yeah,
you're
that's
actually
it.
Called Producer James.
I'm going to call myself Producer James from now on, yeah. It's
okay.
catchy, right? It's catchy.
It's good that we actually have Producer James on this show today because in part it was because of him that we are doing this show. When in a previous episode called Room 101, we all discussed what things, and I think there were four of us, the same four of us, were all discussing what things we put in a Room 101, things that we don't like about ELT. And hey guys, how about I just cue up and play what James said, what he would put into Room 101. Sound good?
Okay.
Yep, go for it.
Here's the situation, okay? We're getting towards the end of a unit or maybe towards the end of the course, and I need a nice review activity so that my students can, before they have their test, they can do some revision of the key language points they've learned in the previous few weeks. And I open my teacher's book and I see a board game, which requires me to photocopy the board. Maybe I need 3 sets of this because of the size of my class. And then I've got 2 different sets of cards, and I have to photocopy all of them and sit there and cut them all out. And, of course, if you don't have a laminator, then you're going to have to do all this again in 3 months because your students are going to make a right mess of all the cards. And it just takes forever to go through, just like the dominoes. It takes forever to get the whole thing ready, to set it up, to explain the rules and everything. So I have no problem in theory with board games. I like them a lot, but the problem is just how if they could just be delivered to me like, here's your board game to play. Okay, thanks. But it's the fact that I have to sit there for hours.
So James, Producer James, this is on you, this episode.
Well, I'm happy to be inspirational, Lindsay. What can I say?
Well, it's one of those statements that you've not quite lived down, though, is it? Given that all 3 of us are gamers in one sense or another, then all 3 of the sorry, Kerry, didn't mean to leave you out there, because James, Lindsay, and I spend a lot of time sending messages to each other about games. So his statement was pretty much outrageous when he said it in Room 101. So
I like to provoke. What can I say?
Well, you certainly did.
I did. In fact, there even someone wrote a blog post about this, didn't we?
Yes.
Naomi Epstein
How
decided to put me in my place, and as I said, I was happy to inspire ideas and conversation.
Yes, it reminds me of that saying, how to start a fight on the internet. Give an opinion, wait. Let's start with a very simple, but actually maybe more difficult than it sounds question. What is a game? for example, like when does something stop being an activity and become a game? Because I think there's a lot of like gray area in ELT of, you could say lots of things to an outsider looking, they think it's a game. Or is it a game or an activity?
I Googled this. I Googled this because can I open this? So I Googled what is a game, what defines a game, and thegamesjournal.com says a game must have game rules, a goal, that the course of the game is never the same, i.e. there's an element of chance, and there must be competition. How about that?
I was thinking about competition as being the difference between an activity and a game, the competitive element. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, you can't have cooperative games, though, can't you? I mean, not necessarily. Well, I could maybe think of ELT examples, but there are cooperative games.
But isn't a cooperative game, isn't the competition to better yourself next time you play it, kind of thing?
Or against the game itself, isn't it? Isn't it kind of beating the strategy of the game or whatever? I can't think of one in EFL at the moment. I can think of ones outside of EFL.
Yeah, I mean, so can I, because you're usually competing against the game mechanic in a cooperative board game, yeah.
But what is interesting, the article from which I got those criteria begins, a game is any activity, and then it continues. So,
what's the difference? Activity and a game. Is a running dictation a game or an activity?
Activity, and pointless, and completely pointless as well.
Because I would say it's an activity as well. Although to an outside person, they might say it's a game. There's an element of competition. There are rules. I suppose there's an element of chance in that you have a chance of like...
And there is a goal, I guess.
There's a goal.
It's a game in the same way that something like Pass the Parcel or, that kind of game is a game, I think it's similar to that kind of thing.
Okay, well, how about, why don't we approach this from another direction then? What games, regardless of the definition, what games, the things that you think of as games, are your favorite go-tos in class? Like, what kind of things do you do that you would consider a game? I'll start off this one. So, for example, one game that I've often used before, a vocabulary game of back to the board. Everybody knows it. It's like that, or hot seat, where one person is sitting in the one person from a team comes up and sits in a chair, and I write a word behind them. They can't see it, but their teammates can, and their teammates have to shout out the definitions, and the person in the chair has to guess the word. And they have a certain amount of words that they have to try to get through in a space of, a minute or two, and then it's the other team's turn. So that's one. Anybody else have games that they really like, that they go to?
With younger learners, there's stuff like Kim's game, where you have a tray of objects, or, they can also be phrases on the board if you want, and the idea is that you close your eyes, one of them disappears, you open your eyes, which one has gone? I think, so that's something that kids will think of as a game. Whether or not it actually comes under our game definition, I don't know. And another favourite of mine is Pelmanism, with any kind of matching stuff, whether it's picture to word, question to answer, verb to regular past, or whatever, those kind of games as well. Young learners, and I think adults as well, sometimes will while away some time with vocabulary cards and Pelmanism.
Okay. That would surely be considered a game because it comes from the famous book Kim by Rudyard Kipling.
And if you, just to add to that, that book was written in 1901, and the game was in the book itself. The game was designed to train spies.
I'm going to share that with my kids next time.
Yeah. I never realised it was called Kim's Game until I became a teacher. Actually, it appeared in one of those recipe books somewhere. I was like, oh, that's what it's called. I would add my go-to game. I would do back to the. I would. It's kind of variations on back to the board or hot seat. So it's to make it a bit difficult, combine it with taboo. So there are certain words they can't say when they're describing the word. And I also for me, I quite like simply having teams line up in front of the whiteboard, giving everybody a whiteboard marker, and running and writing words on the board. Well, interesting. They're pretty much all vocabulary games that we've just come up with there, isn't it?
That's true. I don't understand your running and writing game when you just said that a running dictation was utterly pointless.
No, running dictation, but that is utterly pointless. That's just pointless busyness. A running dictation is like, let's cut up pieces of paper and stick them all around the room, and then run and try and memorize it. So it kind of takes the focus off the dictation part to me.
You can find us on Facebook and Twitter if you want to comment about this, listeners.
next time we do Room 101, I'll bring running dictation.
Okay, Sean, just prepare yourself, okay? Because I've been there, and
so
expect now you're going to get told off, okay?
I mean, if it inspires an episode on dictation, so be it. Because dictation itself is one of my favourite things in the classroom. So
Sean pivots. James, do you want to tell us a go-to?
Well, as you know, I'm famous for my love of games in the classroom. So, of all the games I had to choose from, I don't know if you again, is this a game or is this an activity? But with some 11 and 12-year-olds I was teaching last year, they loved to play. I went to the supermarket and just as a kind of warmer thing. So they just, like when they go around and they have to add items to the shopping list and then have to remember everything everyone else has said. And it's one of those things that's been around forever. And I was amazed by how much they were like, oh, can we play this? Can we play this supermarket teacher? I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, no problem. So that was one that I like doing. I'm not sure it's overburdened with pedagogical quality.
No, but it reminds me. I think what I've learned as a teacher, there are two things from life experience that are good for games. Kid stuff, like things you learn as a kid. So, like I went to supermarket as a game I learned as a child. One of those car games, along with I Spy and those kind of things. So all those games we learned as kids are really useful ELT things. And secondly, any television quiz show becomes a good ELT game.
Oh yeah, for sure. Jeopardy. Has anyone done their own version of Jeopardy? Do you know Jeopardy, yeah. British people, or?
Yeah. I think one of the first. I actually almost got on Jeopardy when I was 18, for real. I think one of the first training sessions, even before I sort of moved into training, was which I did in school workshop, was on changing games changing quizzes into games, and they all work. Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune. In the UK, we have Countdown, which is essentially anagram game. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I mean, there is a website now which have all these things as templates that you can just download and use, can't they? But
back up there, people listening. I found that websites like that as well. I don't know the name of the site itself unless you have it to hand, Sean.
Super Teacher Tools
have templates for various games, and I think they're PowerPoint ones, aren't they?
Yeah, so they've got PowerPoint, they've got Jeopardy, and they've got Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and those kind of things on it. But we'll put some more on the website. Welcome to Timeline, the TEFL Commute's on-the-move game for teachers. Okay, in order to play Timeline, you need to draw yourself a mental timeline. We've all used timelines in the classroom. Get the pen, draw a line. Over here on the left is usually the past. Moving towards the right is the future, with somewhere with a little cross or an intersection for now in the middle. So draw yourself that mental timeline now. Great, so you're almost ready to play. So all you need now is a topic. And in keeping with today's episode, the topic is board games. Yes, obviously, in an episode where we talk about board games, the timeline naturally is going to be about that subject. So in this timeline, I'm going to give you a number of games, and you have to put them in the correct order of their invention. So did chess come before Scrabble, or did Pictionary come before them both? It's time to find out. So if you're ready, let's play Timeline. Here we go then. Remember, you're putting the games in order of invention. So the oldest game will be the first one in your timeline, and the one closest to now will be the newest one. And so to get us underway, here is our first game, and it's that game that inspires many lessons of modal verbs for deduction. It's Cluedo. Our second game to add to the timeline is Scrabble. How about adding snakes and ladders? Few more left. Now let's add Trivial Pursuit. What about the game Senate, or sometimes called the game of passing? How about Pictionary? And finally, where would you put chess? So that's 7 games in total. Cluedo, Scrabble, Snakes and Ladders, Trivial Pursuit, Senate, chess, and Pictionary. Thinking time. Okay, how do you think you did? It's time for some answers. As usual, timeline not as easy as you might think it is. 7 games, 1 mark for each in the correct order. 7 marks is what you're aiming for to feel smug for the rest of the day. So, what was the first game, I hear you ask? Well, the oldest game on the list is believed to be invented around 3100 BC, and that is the game of passing, or senat. And it was found within the Egyptian pyramids when they started excavating those. No one's quite sure of the rules, but they know it's played on a grid of 30 squares in 3 rows of 10 and uses pawns. So your first game is senat. The second game on your list, this will probably surprise you. The second oldest game of the 7 we gave you is Snakes and Ladders. Yes, that's right. Snakes and Ladders originated in India in 200 BC. It is a morality game which was designed to teach children about good and evil. The version that you probably know actually dates back from 1943, which was called Shoots and Ladders. However, for the sake of the timeline, 200 BC, Snakes and Ladders. Coming a little bit more forward in time, but still a long time ago, we go back to India in the year 6 AD to get chess. And that's when chess is first documented. So our first game was Senate, our second game was Snakes and Ladders, our third game was chess, our fourth game is Scrabble, which was originated in 1938 by Alfred Butts, but actually was brought to market in 1948 by James Brunot. However, whichever date you've chosen, that is the next game on our timeline. Just 1 year later, our fifth game is on the timeline, and that is the modal verbs game of Cluedo. Yes, it was Reverend Green, and it was with the lead piping in the study. 2 to go, and so our next game, so the second youngest game on the timeline, is Trivial Pursuit, and that was that originated in Canada in 1979. And finally, another classroom staple, the youngest game on our timeline is Pictionary, which was in 1985. So there you have it, 7 board games, and in the order going back from 3100 BC right up to 1985. And join us again in a future podcast episode for another edition of Timeline.
We now return to your regular programming.
Well, there are some famous books in our field that were about games, and I've got one right here, and I was amazed that when we were talking before the show started, James said he didn't know it, because I'm sure lots of our listeners will, but maybe you have to be of a certain age. I don't know. Grammar Games by Mario Winvalucri
That's my favorite.
It's my favorite book. Although lots of them, I don't even know if they're really games so much.
Well, yeah, I think I was just thinking when you said Grammar Games, I think that's where I learnt the vanishing sentence, where you put the sentence on the board and take words out of it, and I wouldn't call that a game. That for me is an activity.
A lot of these are just really cool activities, I thought, but the fact that it was called Grammar Games, one, meant that it probably sold way more copies, and was the kind of thing that it was published in 1984.
Wow, so long ago.
By Cambridge University Press. I've got a first edition here, actually. It's the green cover. And then it was picked up by somebody else afterwards. But, Carrie, do you know this one as well?
I do, yeah. That's one of my staples. When I actually started teaching 2 years after the book was published, so it's kind of been with me, I think, most of my teaching career. I still dip into it.
You're making me feel very young. I'm enjoying this a lot.
James is just dying to say,
I'm probably the elder at the table, as well as being the non-gamer. There are lots of labels today.
What favorite games of yours were in Grammar Games, Carrie?
I like as well as the grammar games, I like a lot of the dictation games, which again there's that question about, is the dictation a game or is it an activity? And this isn't really a game, but it's more that thing of, do you know the one with the dubious sentences as to whether they're true, false, or you don't know, and actually it's more like a kind of a lateral thinking game. So you have to, the teacher dictates a sentence, something like, he made a father of me, for example, and then and you have to say, does this make any sense? Does it not make any sense? Does it go in the no sense column, the yes sense column, or somewhere in the middle? And then you have to debate as to whether or not you've put it in the right column, and give the sentence sense by thinking of a context where it would make sense. And that one's one of my favourites. And now I can't think of a good example of the sentences.
But that's definitely an activity. No, I'm not. That's an activity, not a game for me. But just going back to where we started.
But you get points for if you can persuade the rest of the class that your sentence does have sense, even though they think it's nonsensical. That's where the points come in. It's kind of a persuasion.
Has anyone ever played Grammar Tennis? That was from Grammar Games. Do you remember that one?
No, you have to explain that one for me.
Student A serves a word. So if you do it with verbs, I'll play it with you, James. I'm going to serve the past participle. Then you have to respond with the simple past, and I hit it back to you with the simple present. So I'm going to serve gone. Now you have to answer.
With what do I have to answer with?
Past. The simple, oh my gosh! I thought it was only went, go, and then now it's my service again. I'm going to serve become.
Became.
My gosh, I thought it was only my elementary students that would have trouble with this game. Obviously, it's more challenging.
I think we're going to have to make it a game of
I was role-playing, obviously.
I actually get my students up and hold a racket in their hand when they play that. They're pretending they're holding a racket, and they knock it to each other across the class.
Yeah, because you can do it. I always did it with verbs, but I'm just looking at it again. You can do it with language and nationality, country, so Turkish, Turkey. Adjective, comparative, superlative.
Adjectives, yeah.
Yeah.
You could remove the restrictions as well and just use it as a kind of free, almost revision or brainstorming activity. So you give them the topic, so jobs, and then they lose the point. So they serve to each other and keep saying jobs, and they hit it across the net. But as soon as somebody hesitates too long or forgets, then it goes like 15 love to the.
Yeah, or they've run out of jobs.
Yeah. So you could. It was, again, I think it was a good starting point, and then moving on from it.
Another famous book in our field about games was a series of books by Jill Hadfield and Charles Hadfield, Elementary Communication Games, Intermediate Communication Games, also affectionately known as the yellow photocopyable book and the pink photocopyable book and the blue one. Anyone play with any of those? Anyone did any of those?
I did, but I guess they were a staple of my early teaching career, and I was kind of racking my brain to try and remember what was in them, and I think I've forgotten most of what was in them.
I took a look at them recently, and what I was struck by was the sheer amount of cutting up. Now, I did do a lot of them, but there was a lot of cutting up, and also there was things like. I was teaching at the time when I was using this I was teaching in a private academy, so I didn't have very large classes. So lots of the really fun activities were sort of like, you need, for every 18 students, if you have more than 18 students, have 2 sets of cards, like for a class of 36, which I know some teachers have, but I had like 6 or 7. So lots of the really fun kind of elaborate games in my memory, I couldn't do because I didn't have like 12 or 18 or whatever. There was a really cool mystery murder game, I remember.
Yeah.
And there was another one which was like a storytelling game, which was like fairy tale story elements. So you would lay down a card like a dragon, and then you'd have to tell the story beginning with the dragon, and someone would put down the castle card and would continue the story like that. Those were great games.
Yeah, that's from writing games, I think, isn't it? Yeah, and I remember the Neighbours one where you had to work out where everyone lived on the street, and you had like the map of the street. I think that one you could do with 8, because it was a question, wasn't it, of which ones can I actually use with my class of 8 students? Yeah, I remember using that one over and over.
And you spend all that time preparing it, and then you realise that one student's away that day or something. I've just looked up to see if you can still buy them on the instant delivery site that there is, and Elementary Communication Games is selling for £63.91 at the moment.
Wonderful, great.
Yeah, there you go. I think the one that I think we were talking about just before the podcast, I think the one that kind of supplanted all that, and perhaps because it is newer, is Pronunciation Game, Mark Hancock's book, Pronunciation Games. And And I think that was a great because I think there's also that was an area where a lot of teachers feel insecure, and so just a whole book of photocopyable games that you could focus on pronunciation was a really good idea. And for me, the journey, I don't know, the one where you have to go left or right is my favorite. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that's my favourite in training sessions as well, is the journey.
Yeah, now, as I said, I'm not particularly big on games, but I would say that this book is, if I had to recommend, like, I don't know, a top 10 or top 5 books that every teacher
would
should
it be
have.
your Desert Island book, James?
It might be one of them. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out one day when someone else pulls out at the last minute. I think it's brilliant. And I really like the minimal pairs bingo because it's so good at making students aware of making them aware of the idea of minimal pairs. And so getting them to hear the difference between bad and bed and bet and so on. I've used that a lot. And you can see that kind of realization in students' faces as they're playing.
Definitely. I've seen, that is a definite classic. And I think it's one of the probably the most recent really popular books that had games in the title. And even then, I'd probably say it's around at least 15 years old now.
It must be, yeah, if not more.
Well, 20 maybe, I think.
Yeah. I think the good thing about the pronunciation games is that short items are fine, because what worries me a little about the stuff like the tennis and whatever is just this practicing of single words and not having a context for them. And whereas with the pronunciation, it is sounds. It's individual sounds that they're practicing, and somehow I feel more comfortable with it there.
1995.
Wow. My gosh.
Well, and to me, that feels like it was. I can remember it coming into our school library. Wow, but it's 22. How old are we? Jeez.
Have any of you ever played non-ELT games in class, like board games? I know there are ELT versions of board games, like Snakes and Ladders, that jumps to mind, or one where you just move around a board and there are questions on each square, and you just roll a dice and kind of move around. So that's another classic one, and teachers often make those. But what about like let's put inverted comma real games that you play in class, not digital, but board games. So, for example, I used to play Boggle. I played that with
Boggle, Scrabble, bananagrams, those kind of things.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I haven't played it myself, but I know it's very popular at my school, which is that, and I don't know what it's called, but it's that game where you stick someone's name on your head. And then they have to try and guess. You have to try and guess which.
That's an ELT one, or is there a real game like?
Well, isn't it?
That's a real game.
It's a real party game.
Yeah, there's a digital version of that, which I want to come to in the next episode.
Oh, right. A game a real game, which is probably again going back 20 odd years ago. You probably I doubt that you can play it so easily anymore. Was a game called Pass the Bomb.
Pass the bomb. Okay.
Yeah, and it was the bomb. Essentially, the game, the real life game, and the way you play in the classroom is exactly the same. So there are a set of cards, and each card has a letter on it, and you basically have to say a word beginning with that letter. Yeah. So if it's S, you say school or shore, those kind of things. And there was a plastic bomb, and you pressed the button underneath, and it started ticking. And essentially, the bomb was a random timer. So it could last for 10 seconds. It could last for a minute. And as you said your third, you passed the bomb around the circle. And when the bomb went off, if you were the one that the bomb went off, or you gained the card, and when the one with the least amount of cards won the game. But it was a good. I think I come from a family of I've played games since I was knee high to a grasshopper. So it was one of these things my dad had, and I was immediately saw how it could be used in the classroom. But I guess you can't really walk into it. I don't know how in our current environment, walking into the classroom and saying, let's pass the bomb today, might not
could just be an alarm on your phone or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You don't need.
You'd have a ringtone or something instead of an exploding bomb.
I always liked it because when it came out in the Czech Republic, it was called Tic Tac Boom in Czech,
nice.
which is a nice way. And I was going to say, I've got another one, which was just this random game that was left in our school, which was called Compatibility. And I looked it up on the internet last night to see if it still existed. And it was a really interesting game because the idea was to find out how compatible you were with the person sat opposite you. So, for example, if I was sat opposite James and you were sat opposite Kerry, there'd be a topic, which might be teaching. And you'd have a whole stack of cards which would have different images or words on. And you would have to choose a certain number of cards that you associated with that topic and lay them on the table face down. And then when it was your turn to go, you would turn over the cards. And every time you matched, you got points. But it was quite interesting in there so that was the real game. And of course, that would cause a whole manner of divorces and breaks up partnerships when the partners weren't compatible. But in the classroom, it was really good for discussion. Why did you choose this card? What was your association with it? So that was another game that I played quite a lot, certainly when I worked in the school in the Czech Republic.
Producer James here with a quick message to say thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to show your support for the show, then you can help us in just a minute and it won't cost you a thing. Head over to your social media platform of choice, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or whatever, and let people know how much you enjoy the show. With your help, we can reach even more teachers. Okay, on with the show.
Did you have a game, Lindsay? You mentioned kind of Boggle and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I played various different kind of card games, Boggle and things like that. More recently, and I haven't played it yet, but there are a couple of games that I'm itching to play with students.
I think I'm probably going to say the same game here.
There's a couple of really good ones out. One, which is relatively new, that was being written about a lot, is one called Spyfall. And Spyfall is a game, so basically it's a series of cards, and everybody, if the four of us were playing, everybody gets a card with a place on it. And we all know, there's a list of places, so everybody can see the list of places, and we all get the same place. Let's say a cathedral, or a casino, or a cruise ship, or, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower. But one person has a card that is the spy. Now, the spy doesn't know where everyone else is, and everyone else doesn't know who the spy is. So, and then we have to talk, and the objective for the spy is to guess where they are, and the objective for everyone else is to catch the spy out in a lie.
Right.
So for example, if we were in a casino and I knew that I'm in a casino, I might ask Carrie, so Carrie, have you won any money tonight? But probably wouldn't, because then it would maybe tip the spy off that we are in the casino. Because the minute the spy says, I know where we are,
Yeah.
then if they're wrong, everybody else wins a point. If they're right, they win. They win like a lot of points. But
I guess so. That with the more people that are involved in the game, the better. In that case.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a great game with like 8 people, 8 or 10 people, and everyone is asking questions. So you're asking questions, but everyone has to listen very carefully because they're trying to find out who the spy is, and the spy is trying to listen carefully to the questions to guess where they are. That's one that I would really.
I think you and I have the same other game when you say the second game,
which is Mafia.
Oh no, we don't then, because I was going to say Codenames, because that for me, Codenames is
Codenames. I've seen it, but I haven't played it.
Oh my word, what a game! The moment we started playing it was like, apart from this is so much fun, it's just like this would work in the classroom. That's genuinely one of the best games I've played in the last year or so.
By the way, just for our listeners, Spyfall and Codename are 2 very new games compared to the other ones that we were talking about, Boggle, Scrabble, things like that. These are the kind of from a new generation of party games.
Codenames was the game of the year. I think it was voted game of the year last year or the year before, maybe. But that's fabulous. So it's actually it fits into the idea of spies. So I said basically there's a grid of words on the table. You have I can't remember 5x5 grid, I think. Offhand, and you play in teams, so minimum people of 2, but there could be more in a team. And one person is trying to give clues to which words belong to your team, without trying to give away which is the spy card. And you could only use one word to try and give them a definition of the cards on the table. So it sounds a bit convoluted, but it's really simple and really, really good fun. And as you start off basically just like trying to hope the person gets one card, but the more you play it, you try and think of words that would give away 2 or 3 cards in one go. It's really, really good vocabulary. I very much recommend it. I mean, you're a gamer anyway, Lindsay, so I recommend it as a game to play in real life as well, completely. Well,
if we're talking about modern games, then I think we have to mention, has anyone played Cards Against Humanity with their students?
I wondered if that was going to come up. I have played it. I would never play it with students. But do you want to tell us a little bit about Cards Against Humanity, James?
Well, I've only played it once, but as I remember, you get a hand of cards, and each one has got just a set of like random situations and answers on it, and then you have to provide an answer to a question
from within your cards.
From within your card. So it could be just like some completely random, bizarre answer, or it could actually kind of make sense, and you've got to try and impress the person who at that turn is judging, and so they might, and it's completely arbitrary. They just decide which one they like the most. It might make them laugh, or cringe, or or offend them in a way they enjoy, because it's pretty full on.
Why is it called Cards Against Humanity? The reason
because the combinations. So you might get a question, something like, the question would be, what were Michael Jackson's dying words? And then everyone has cards, and then they have to play one of the cards that they think would impress the person asking the question the most. The thing is that many of the cards might be things like, well, I don't want, they'll be very inappropriate. They would be things that juxtaposed with that question seem very inappropriate or...
okay. The reason I ask is it sounds exactly the same in concept to the game Apples to Apples.
I've heard that as well, yeah.
Which I would play with students, it's the same thing. It's basically there's a random topic and you have a set of cards and you have to choose the card that you think the person would think best fits that topic each time round, which is essentially the same set of rules, but they're much less convoluted cards. And that's a great little party game, but it would work very well in the ELT classroom, especially if you're asking people to justify why they chose the cards.
Yeah, there's a game that kind of flips that with pictures. Do you know Dixit?
Yes, I've heard of that as well, yeah.
It's really, really pretty for a start. The cards are really pretty. And basically, it's kind of the other way around, is that you've got in your hand 6 different image cards. And then you tell a little story with one of your cards. And everybody else has got image cards as well. They have to decide which of their cards best fits your story. And then everybody puts the cards, gives the cards to the storyteller. The storyteller shuffles them around, puts them down on the table, and everyone has to vote for which card they think was the one that originated the story. And then you can get points if people vote for your card, but you didn't originate the story because you picked such a good card that went so well with the story. So it's kind of a very rich meanings and images and vocabulary game in there as well. And it's gorgeous. Kind of aesthetically, it's something that's just so pleasing to play with.
I'm going to go to a certain site and have a look at ordering that now.
Yeah.
Here's the Cards Against Humanity. If you look online, you find examples of them. So here's an example. The question would have been, what are my parents hiding from me? And then someone plays the card Harry Potter erotica as an example of juxtaposition, right?
My word.
So
basically we all actually need to stop recording the podcast over various internet means, get together and have a gaming day.
Yeah. Well, let's finish our roundtable though with our opinion on games, as if we were doing a games useful or not in the classroom. Just a quick yes or no, and you can qualify it if you want. We will finish with James. Sean, why don't you start?
Yes, very much so.
Can you qualify that a bit?
Yes, I think games from whichever end of the scale, the simple revision games that we've talked about at the beginning to these more full-on games, are all have great purpose in the classroom, and I think are much more interesting sometimes than other material. Authentic, fun, generate language. Is that enough justification for you, Lindsay?
I think so. Let's move on to Kerry. Kerry, what do you say?
Okay, yeah, I'm a yes as well, although probably in moderation. But yeah, definitely bring in games from time to time. I wouldn't say I'd have them in every single lesson.
Okay, I'm going to also give probably an almost unqualified yes, because I think play is an important part of language learning that can often be overlooked. There are problems with games, but I think they can be easily surmounted. I'd agree you don't have games all the time, but it's an important part of the lesson. James, the final call rests with you. Yours is worth 3 points.
I feel like it all hinges on this, like it. Well, yes, of course, but with 2 provisos. One is there has to be a good reason for doing it. Even if it's just a warmer, that's fine, but there has to be a reason for doing it, not just because it's fun. And the second thing is I don't want too much preparation. There you go.
There you go. James has spoken. So
there you go.
We will let the rest of our listeners decide for themselves if we've made a convincing case for games or not. We'll put links to all of the games that we mentioned. As you were listening, there may be a few things that you think, oh gosh, I'd really like to play that, or what was that book? We'll put links to all of these in the show notes. If you have a favorite game that you would like to share with us, you can find us on our Facebook page, at the TEFL Commute, or at our Twitter page, or on Twitter, or at our website, www.teflcommute.com. Well, anyway, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thanks for joining us, James.
You're welcome. It's been very enjoyable, although it has been a bit analog, so I'm going to go off and get my virtual reality headset on now.
I'll talk to you about that after the podcast, James.
Yes, and in fact, that reminds me, we will be doing another episode on games, maybe in a slightly different format, where we will be addressing the whole digital world of games and how that connects to the language classroom. But in the meantime, this has been the TEFL Commute, a podcast for language teachers that's not about language teaching, although it continually comes up. Thanks very much for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
As your commute is coming to an end, here's an idea you can try out in your classroom. The aim of this activity is for the students to make a revision board game. This idea requires some large sheets of paper and coloured pens, so make sure you have them at hand. You'll also need some gaming equipment such as counters and dice. After putting the students into small groups, ask them to come up with at least 20 questions to revise part of their course. This could be questions about topics in their course book, vocabulary-related questions, and so on. Once the students have come up with their questions, the next step is for them to design their game board. Give each group a piece of paper and the coloured pens, and ask them to come up with a design for a board for their game. How many squares will be in the game? Will there be any traps? How does a person win? Finally, they should write down the rules of their game. When each group is ready, swap games and let each group play. You can find the instructions for these activities at our website, www.teflcommute.com. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Sean Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.